At my son's wedding, my sister introduced me to my son's boss. She smiled sweetly, then said, "This is my older brother, the unemployed loser of the family." Several guests laughed awkwardly. I didn't. I simply smiled. My son's boss looked at me carefully, then back at my sister. His expression changed. Calmly he said 4 words. "You're fired, Meredith." The ballroom fell completely silent. Even the band stopped playing. My name is Daniel Carter. I'm 58 years old, and despite what my sister believed, I wasn't unemployed. At least not anymore. For almost 30 years, I owned Carter Precision Manufacturing, a small machine shop that eventually supplied custom parts to hospitals, aviation companies, and local manufacturers. 8 years earlier, I sold the business. Not because it failed, because I wanted to retire early after my wife, Linda, survived cancer. We traveled, volunteered, spent time with our son, Noah. Life was peaceful. Meanwhile, my younger sister, Meredith, built her entire identity around her career. She was vice president of human resources at one of the largest engineering companies in the state. She loved titles, luxury brands, networking events, and reminding everyone that she was self-made. She also loved introducing me as unemployed. Never retired, always unemployed. I stopped correcting her years ago, because people eventually reveal who they are without any help. I had no idea this wedding would finally prove that. Noah's wedding was beautiful, simple, elegant, exactly what he and his fiancée Emma wanted. About halfway through the reception, Emma whispered, "Dad, my manager wants to meet you." She pointed across the ballroom. Standing beside Meredith was Richard Lawson, CEO of Lawson Engineering, the company where Meredith worked. I'd heard his name before, but we'd never met. As we walked over, Meredith smiled too sweetly. "Richard, this is my brother Daniel." She paused dramatically. "Our family's unemployed loser." Several nearby coworkers laughed politely. I didn't react. Instead, I offered Richard my hand. He shook it firmly, then froze, his eyes narrowed. "Daniel Carter?" "Yes," he smiled. "The Daniel Carter?" I chuckled. "I suppose so." Meredith looked confused. Richard suddenly laughed. "I've been trying to meet you for years." Now everyone looked confused, especially Meredith. Then Richard slowly turned toward her. His smile disappeared. "You introduced the founder of Carter Precision Manufacturing as an unemployed loser." Meredith's face lost all color, but Richard wasn't finished. Richard looked directly at Meredith. "Do you know why Lawson Engineering exists today?" She blinked. "No," he pointed at me. "Because 15 years ago, when our company nearly went bankrupt, Daniel accepted delayed payments for 18 months. The room became completely silent. Richard continued. "Every other supplier cut us off. He didn't. He trusted us. Without that decision, Lawson Engineering would have closed. No company, no promotions, no executive position, no vice president title. Nothing." Meredith stared at me. She genuinely had no idea. Truthfully, I never told anyone. Helping struggling businesses wasn't something I advertised. Richard shook his head. "Leadership isn't measured by job titles. It's measured by character." Then he quietly added, "As of this moment, you're no longer representing Lawson Engineering." Meredith whispered, "You can't fire me at a wedding." Richard calmly replied, "I just did." Gasps echoed across the ballroom. My son Noah looked horrified. Emma squeezed his hand. I honestly felt sorry for Meredith, but then she blamed me. "You planned this," I sighed softly. "No, you planned this the day you decided humiliating people made you look important." And unfortunately for Meredith, that wasn't even the biggest secret waiting to come out. Meredith stormed out of the ballroom. Half the guests watched her leave, the other half watched Richard. No one knew what to say. Richard turned toward me. "I'm sorry you had to hear that." I smiled. "You didn't say it." He nodded. "But I should have stopped it years ago." That caught my attention. "What do you mean?" Richard sighed. "I've heard Meredith make comments like that before. About receptionists, maintenance workers, delivery drivers, anyone she believed was beneath her. I warned her more than once. But today, he looked around the wedding. She embarrassed your family during your son's biggest day. There had to be consequences." Noah walked over. He looked worried. "Dad, I'm so sorry." I put a hand on his shoulder. "You've done nothing wrong." Emma smiled gently. "My husband has been telling me for years that you're the humblest man he's ever met." I laughed. "I think he's biased." She shook her head. "No, he learned humility from someone." For a moment the awkwardness disappeared, then my phone vibrated. It was a message from Meredith. "This isn't over." I quietly locked my phone. Some people apologize, others double down. Meredith had chosen the second option. 3 days after the wedding, Meredith appeared at my house. She wasn't angry anymore, she was desperate. Richard officially terminated me. I nodded. I heard. She looked exhausted. I need your help. I almost smiled. For years she introduced me as the family's unemployed loser. Now she needed the unemployed loser. My industry is small, she admitted. Everyone knows why I was fired. She wanted one thing, a recommendation. Specifically, she wanted me to call Richard. I calmly poured 2 cups of coffee, then sat across from her. Why would I do that? She looked down. Because you're my brother. I quietly replied, were we family when you mocked me? Silence, complete silence. Then for the first time in my life, Meredith started crying, not dramatic tears, quiet ones. I don't know why I became like this. I believed she meant it, but understanding the problem didn't erase the damage. Before leaving, she whispered, I've lost everything. I watched her drive away, and I wondered, was losing everything finally enough to change her? I didn't have to wait long to find out. The following week, Richard invited me to lunch, not to discuss Meredith or the wedding. Instead, he surprised me. Our company is launching a mentorship program. I smiled. Congratulations. He shook his head. I want you to lead it. I laughed. I'm retired. Exactly. He explained that young engineers and managers needed guidance from someone who had built a business from the ground up, not someone chasing promotions, someone who understood people. I agreed to think about it. As we finished lunch, Richard became serious. There's something else you should know. Apparently, Meredith's firing wasn't caused by the wedding alone. The wedding had simply been the final incident. Over the previous year, multiple employees had complained about her behavior. Disrespect. Bullying. Looking down on staff. The company had documented everything. Richard sighed. The wedding only confirmed she hadn't changed. I drove home thinking about that, because consequences rarely come from one mistake. They usually come from years of repeated choices. Then that evening, my son Noah called. Dad, I think Aunt Meredith just did something that could make everything even worse. Noah sounded frustrated. Dad, Aunt Meredith posted about you online. I immediately opened the link. Meredith had written a long post on a professional networking site. According to her, she'd been fired because Richard favored old friends. She claimed I had manipulated the situation. Within hours, hundreds of people had shared it. Some supported her. Many didn't. Then something unexpected happened. Former employees began commenting, one after another. A receptionist wrote, Meredith publicly mocked me for taking the bus to work. A maintenance supervisor commented, she once told me people in coveralls shouldn't use the executive elevator. Another employee added, HR ignored our complaints for years. The comments kept coming, dozens of them. No one was defending Meredith. She quietly deleted the post that evening, but screenshots had already spread. Richard later called me. We're conducting an internal review. I sighed. I never wanted this. I know, he replied, but people finally feel safe enough to speak. For the first time, Meredith wasn't fighting one person. She was facing the consequences of how she treated many people. Then a letter arrived at my house. It was handwritten, from Meredith. The letter was only 2 pages long. No excuses, no blaming, just honesty. Daniel, I finally understand why everyone stayed quiet around me. They weren't respecting me. They were afraid of me. I read every word carefully. She admitted that after becoming an executive, she'd started believing job titles determined a person's value. The higher she climbed, the less she listened. Then came the sentence that broke my heart. Somewhere along the way, I forgot that you built your company by respecting everyone. I folded the letter. For several days, I didn't reply. Not because I was angry, because I wanted to know whether this apology was real. Then Richard called again. You'll want to hear this. Meredith had declined a settlement agreement. Instead, she accepted responsibility during the company's investigation. She even apologized personally to several former employees. No lawyers, no public relations team, just sincere apologies. Richard sounded surprised. I think she's finally changing. Maybe, or maybe she had simply run out of people to blame. Time would tell. And time had one more surprise waiting for our family. A month later, Noah and Emma hosted a small family barbecue. Nothing fancy, just close relatives. To everyone's surprise, Meredith came. She arrived early, not in expensive designer clothes, not wearing luxury jewelry, just jeans, a simple sweater, and a tray of homemade cookies. The first thing she did was walk over to the catering staff. She thanked every single person by name. Then she helped clear tables, refilled drinks, collected empty plates. Nobody asked her to. Later she sat beside me. I interviewed for a new job yesterday. I smiled. How did it go? She laughed. I don't know. But for the first time, I spent more time asking about the team than talking about myself. That sounded like progress. Then she quietly reached into her bag. She handed me an old photograph. It showed the two of us as children standing in Dad's garage, building a wooden birdhouse together. I found this while cleaning my office. She smiled sadly. You were always proud of what you built. I became proud of what was written on my business card. She looked at me. I chose the wrong thing. I placed the photo back into her hands. No, you forgot the right thing. And now, I think you're remembering. For the first time in years, she smiled without pretending. 6 months later, Richard called again. Daniel, would you come to the office tomorrow? I assumed it was about the mentorship program. It wasn't. When I arrived, Richard led me into the training room. Nearly 50 new managers were waiting. Then I noticed someone sitting in the front row. Meredith. She stood as I walked in. Richard smiled. Today's topic is leadership through respect. He looked at Meredith. She asked if she could attend. Not to speak, to listen. For 2 hours I shared stories about factory workers, receptionists, janitors, engineers. I explained that every successful business I'd ever built depended on people who were often invisible. When the session ended, the room erupted in applause. As everyone left, a young supervisor stopped Meredith. I didn't know your brother was Daniel Carter. She smiled. I used to introduce him completely wrong. Then she added something I'd never expected to hear. He spent years building people. I spent years ranking them. The young supervisor nodded. I won't make that mistake. For the first time, Meredith's story became a lesson instead of a warning. A year after Noah's wedding, our family gathered again, this time for Richard and Linda's anniversary dinner. No speeches had been planned, but Noah stood up anyway. I want to thank someone. He looked at me. When I was little, Dad never told me to judge people by their job. He taught me to judge them by how they treated others. Then he smiled toward Meredith. And Aunt Meredith reminded me that people can change if they're willing to face the truth. Meredith wiped away tears. She quietly stood. I don't deserve all the kindness this family has shown me. I smiled. Maybe not a year ago, but today you've earned it. Nobody clapped. Nobody cheered, because this wasn't about winning. It was about healing. Sometimes, silence says more than applause ever could. 2 years after the wedding, I officially retired from mentoring. The final session ended with one question from a young engineer. What's the best business advice you've ever received? I smiled. It wasn't business advice. It came from my late father. I paused. He used to say, if your title disappears tomorrow, who will still be happy to see you? The room became completely quiet. After the session, Meredith waited outside. She handed me a small gift. Inside was a new leather nameplate. It didn't say founder. It didn't say CEO. It simply read Daniel Carter. Builder. I laughed. I like this. She smiled. I know. As we walked to the parking lot, I thought back to Noah's wedding. The day Meredith introduced me as an unemployed loser. At the time, she thought my value came from having no job title. She couldn't have been more wrong, because titles come and go. Companies are bought and sold. Careers end. But the way you treat people, that becomes your real reputation. And in the end, that was the only title that truly mattered.